I thought we were building a future. I thought the man I loved was my partner. But when I saw the bank alerts, I realized I wasn't his wife. I was his personal ATM. He thought he could steal my dreams, but he forgot. I'm the one who keeps the keys to the vault. The coffee was cold, just like the feeling in my chest that morning. I'm 24, living in a sun-drenched apartment in Chicago, and for 3 years, I thought I was the luckiest woman in the world. Mark was everything. Charming, driven, the kind of man who looked at you like you were the only person in the room. We met during my senior year of college. I had just inherited my grandmother's estate. It wasn't millions, but it was enough to start the interior design business I'd always dreamed of. Mark was a consultant, always talking about big deals and even bigger returns. He told me he wanted to protect me. He told me he wanted to handle the boring financial side so I could focus on my art. "I just want you to be happy, Sarah," he'd whisper, brushing a strand of hair behind my ear. "Let me worry about the taxes. Let me worry about the bills. You just create beauty." And I believed him. I really did. I was young, focused on my sketches and fabric swatches. I handed over my login info. I added him to my accounts. I thought it was a sign of maturity, a sign of a real partnership. But then, the small things started happening. I'd go to buy a new software license for my business, and the card would be declined. "Just a glitch," Mark would say, laughing it off as he pulled out his own credit card. Or I'd ask about the quarterly statements, and he'd suddenly become the busiest man on earth. "I'm right in the middle of a merger, babe. Can we talk about this over dinner?" But dinner never happened, and the statements never appeared. I started noticing him, late at night, sitting in the living room with nothing but the glow of his laptop hitting his face. He looked different, hungry. There was a frantic energy in the way his fingers tapped the keys. When I'd walk in, he'd snap the laptop shut. "Just finishing some emails," he'd say, his voice too high, too tight. The tension in our home started to feel like a physical weight. I felt small, like I was walking on eggshells in my own house. My gut was screaming at me. Something was wrong, deeply, fundamentally wrong. But every time I tried to bring it up, he'd make me feel like I was the crazy one. "You're just stressed about the new client, Sarah. You're overthinking things. Don't you trust me?" That was his favorite weapon. Trust. He used it like a shield and like a sword. One afternoon, while he was at the gym, I found a crumpled receipt in the pocket of his blazer. It wasn't for a business lunch. It was for a jewelry store I'd never been to. The amount was $5,000. My heart stopped. I hadn't seen a new piece of jewelry on myself in months. I went to my office. I sat at my desk. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely type. I tried to log into my main savings account. Incorrect password. I tried again. Slow, deliberate. Incorrect password. My breath hitched. He had changed the access. I wasn't just being left out of the conversation. I was being locked out of my own life. I felt a cold sweat break out across my neck. I realized I didn't actually know who this man was. I was living with a stranger, and he had my grandmother's legacy in his hands. I sat there in the dark for hours, waiting, when I heard the front door click open. I didn't move. Mark walked in whistling. He smelled like expensive cologne and sweat. He looked so satisfied. "Hey, babe," he called out. "Why are the lights off?" I turned the desk lamp on. The light was harsh, unforgiving. "Why can't I access my savings, Mark?" He froze, just for a second. Then the mask went back on, that smooth, practiced smile. "Oh, that. I told you, I'm moving things around for the new investment. It's a high-yield opportunity." I had to secure the portal. With a password I don't know, my voice cracked. "With my grandmother's money?" He walked over, trying to put his hands on my shoulders. I flinched away. The look in his eyes shifted. The charm vanished, replaced by something cold, something sharp. "Look, Sarah, you don't understand how these things work. You're an artist. You deal with colors. I deal with reality. That money was just sitting there. I'm making it work for us." "Us," I whispered. "Or for the girl you bought that $5,000 necklace for?" The silence that followed was deafening. Mark didn't deny it. He didn't even flinch. He just leaned against the doorframe and sighed, like I was a child who had just interrupted an important meeting. "Her name is Chloe," he said, his voice flat. She understands the world I'm moving into. She's an asset. You're just a hobbyist with a trust fund, or you were." I felt like he had reached into my chest and squeezed my heart until it stopped. "What do you mean, were?" He pulled out his phone. He showed me a screen. My balance. It was nearly zero. "The investments didn't go as planned, Sarah. Market volatility. You know how it is." He shrugged. He actually shrugged. "But don't worry. Chloe and I are moving to Miami next week. I've already signed the lease with the last of the liquid assets. It's a fresh start for me." I couldn't breathe. The room was spinning. I looked around at the apartment I had decorated. The furniture I had picked out. The life I had built. It was all a lie. He had spent 3 years grooming me, waiting for the right moment to drain me dry and discard me like trash. I fell to my knees. The tears were hot, blurring my vision. I felt hollow, like he had scooped out my entire soul. I listened to him walk into the bedroom. I listened to him start packing his bags. He was humming. He didn't care. He didn't feel a single ounce of regret. "I'll be gone by morning," he called out from the other room. "You should probably call your parents. Maybe they can help you with the rent." I stayed on that floor all night. The darkness was my only companion. I felt the weight of my betrayal, the weight of my stupidity. But somewhere in the middle of the night, the sadness started to change. The tears stopped, the shaking stopped. The coldness in my chest didn't go away, but it sharpened. It became a blade. He thought he had taken everything. He thought I was just a hobbyist, but he forgot one very important thing. My grandmother didn't just leave me money. She left me her legal team, and she left me a backup vault he never even knew existed. Mark left at 6:00 a.m. He didn't even say goodbye. He just left a set of keys on the counter and walked out with his designer suitcases, bags I had paid for. The second his car pulled out of the driveway, I stood up. I wasn't the broken girl on the floor anymore. I was the storm. I called Mr. Henderson, my grandmother's attorney. "It's time," I said. My voice was a whisper, but it was steady. "See, Mark was smart, but he was arrogant. He thought because he changed my passwords, he owned the accounts. But he never checked the fine print of the trust. Any transfer over $10,000 required a secondary digital signature from a co-trustee, a signature he had been forging for months. And I had been logging every single glitch, every declined card, every suspicious login. I hadn't been overthinking. I had been building a case. While Mark was driving to Miami with his asset, I was in a glass-walled office downtown. We triggered the fraud and embezzlement clause in the trust agreement. Since the signatures were forged, the bank was liable, but more importantly, Mark was criminal. But I didn't just want him in jail. I wanted him to feel the exact moment the floor fell out from under him. I knew he had put the fresh start lease in his name using a forged power of attorney. I knew he had bought a car. I knew he had a private account where he'd been hiding the profits from his consulting. We moved fast. By noon, every account he touched was frozen. By 2:00 p.m., the Miami lease was flagged for fraud and canceled. By 4:00 p.m., I had a lien placed on his precious new car. But the best part? The high-yield investment he'd been bragging about? It wasn't a market. It was a shell company he'd set up to launder my money into his private pocket. A shell company that was now, officially, owned by me. I waited until I knew he'd be pulling into that luxury high-rise in Miami. I sent him a text, just one. "I hope Chloe likes the necklace, because it's the last thing you'll ever buy her. Check your balance, Mark." I took back every single penny. I imagine his face. I imagine him standing in that lobby, his cards declining, his phone blowing up with alerts from the authorities. I imagine the look on Chloe's face when she realizes her successful businessman is actually just a common thief with a frozen bank account. The police were waiting for him at the rental office. Forgery, grand larceny, embezzlement. The recovery process took months, but I got it all back. The money, the estate, the business, but more importantly, I got my power back. I'm sitting in my new office now. The sun is setting over the city. I'm 25 now, and I'm no longer the girl who lets men handle the boring stuff. I handle my own destiny now. Mark is serving 5 to 7. Chloe disappeared the second the money did. I sometimes think about that morning, the cold coffee, the cold chest, but now, when I look at my bank statement, I don't see numbers. I see justice. He tried to break me, but he only succeeded in making me unshakable. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, remember, your worth is not defined by their lies. Stay strong, stay smart, and never let them take your light. Subscribe for more stories of justice and revenge.